Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Soul Focused Radio. This is your host, Martin Friedman, and what you're about to listen to is part two of A New Man, Masculinity in America. We will pick up where we left off, telling stories of our relationships with the men in our lives. So sit back, enjoy, and here we go. One of the things I'm hearing, that's, again, I think there's a lot of the same things that are manifested very differently. It feels like, what I'm hearing you say, Mahdi, and Dustin too, is that part of masculinity in America for us is this disconnect from feelings, right? And that, we got lessons to disconnect from our feelings early on. And,
Yes.
For me, it was very different ways than what you all are describing. My father was very emotional. He cried a lot, but the thing was, he cried at movies, right? He cried at movies. I used to joke that he cried at at like the Maxwell House commercial, the coffee commercial. When they break up and then they make up again at the end of the commercial. So my dad cried at everything, like everything, right? But it was, I wouldn't say a manufactured emotion, but I didn't get that emotional connection from him in other areas of life. Like I didn't really see him cry until much later in his life. He didn't cry about things that were happening in life, but he cried at movies, and he used to like seek out movies that made him cry. The movie had to have an ending where he would move. He said, I need movies to be moving," is what he would say. I needed to move me. But what he really meant is he just wanted to be able to cry at movies because that's when
A
it
release.
felt acceptable. Yeah, it was
That was a
release.
release. Because,
100%.
the emotions, when we are like a lot of emotions flows because we've suppressed our feelings. We're not the only ones.
Yeah.
There's a lot of women who suppress
Yeah.
their feelings because they felt like they had to suppress theirs in some instance.
Yeah.
So I suppressed my feelings for a lot of years, and I surmised that every guy around me was suppressing theirs too, because it just wasn't anything that was acceptable. That to know that a guy was expressing his feelings. So what happens is you become emotional, and the emotion that men normally demonstrate as a result of suppressing their feelings, because feelings and emotions are not the same thing. The emotion
Right.
that usually comes up as a result of suppressing your feelings is anger and hostility and rage. For me, because I was suppressing my feelings so much, because your feelings are like language of your soul. They are you communicating with your soul, how you feed your soul. Suppressing them made me very violent. I was so violent. And if it wasn't for football, football gave me the outlet to be violent legally. I would
Mm-hmm.
be in prison without a doubt right now doing time because
Mm-hmm.
I was not only violent, but it was like an orgasm. Beating somebody up was like an orgasm because it was my way of letting out those feelings that I had suppressed about everything else. So in other words, I was like numbing myself by the suppression of those feelings, because what happens when you ignore your feelings or you suppress your feelings, you become numb. And that was the only time I really felt deeply about something, when I like released it, and it would be released through emotional violence and anger and hostility. Thank God for football.
Mahdi, what is breathtaking about what you just said? I mean, because I know you so well right now, and you're one of the most gentle, sensitive people. Like, if you didn't say that, and if I didn't have absolute trust in you, I would never believe that was a part of you, right? So when you say that, right, thinking, we think about this world that we live in, that we inhabit right now, and thinking of the different stories, both Martin, your stories, Mahdi, your stories, there's been no sensitivity to what we are sharing in terms of pulling us forward. I mean, so much of this work, I was fortunate to have you as my life coach, Martin as my brother. So we've created a circle of maleness that we're able to be sensitive with each other. But really, if you don't come to this realization that this is not serving me, there's nothing in this world to really support you coming out of that. And I speculate all the brothers, both white, black, Latino, Filipino, that we meet in prisons have shared the same stories that we have.
Yes.
Something just really hit me hard when you said that, because like what we've had to do is build trust with each other. And what I'm realizing is I've grown up not trusting men, right?
Me too.
And
Mm.
Me too.
think about this, right? This really just hit me really hard as you were talking, Dustin. Like, how do you trust a man before he shows emotion to you, before he shares how he's feeling. That is ultimately what will get us to trust another man. Because we know, because of how we were raised by the men that raised us. Because, like, even though my father was not overtly violent like that, he withheld emotion on many levels, and he was I mean, it may rest in peace. He was very much like, I've identified that he was kind of like an absentee father a lot of times, even though he was in the home, right? So I grew up not trusting other men, and you all know this. Even in my relationship with both of you, there's been times when I haven't trusted you all. And it's really when I've been able to get to a place of trust with other men is when I see like vulnerable, raw, authentic feelings besides just anger. And
You
for
know,
me, for many years, that was the only one I could show. I could
right,
only really show anger, too.
right. When you say that, you grew up not trusting men. I would say that I grew up not trusting anybody. Men were a part of that on that list, and for me, I didn't learn to trust men until I was around guys who could deal with my confidence. I would always look for that, how they react to my confidence, how they react to my trust in me. And if they felt, or they acted a way that was like there was a problem for them, me being my full speed self, and I knew I couldn't trust them. But as I grew older and wiser, I knew that meant that they couldn't trust themselves, and they wanted to hold you to the lack of confidence that they had in themselves. They wanted to hold you to that, because I grew up like as a loner, because I was like the maverick. I was the one that's going to break all the trends and go beyond where everybody left off in the family and do stuff that nobody else in the family has done. So I couldn't afford to have friends. So that made me very transactional. I was very transactional in my relationships. It was years before I started having a relationship with other men, like real. Like in this time in my life, I'm like I say now, I could say I really have real relationships with men. It took me this long to have real relationships with men. And it's, just hearing myself say it is like, wow, even in my own mind.
Yeah, Martin, to answer your question, so much of my lack of trust of men, I think, well, I can honestly say, in terms of fully 100% trust, explicitly trusting a black man, it would be Mahdi. And I found myself looking for mentors, a black man in my life that would kind of replace what my either my stepfather or my father, who wasn't in my life, who would kind of come into my life and be loving and nurturing. I didn't know this, I was doing this consciously, but as I reflect, it was definitely a subconscious pull that I was, trying to pull someone in my life to fill that. And it definitely, Mahdi, through, as we met through our coaching process, he revealed himself in a way that I've never felt a black man do in my life. And I could feel that he just cared for me, just for me, not for me to be anything else. Matter of fact, everything that was embedded in our process was me fully to be me. And when I look back at, the violence that I experienced from men growing up, men that were supposed to love me, that said that. So Madi, you said your dad didn't tell you he loved you. Well, my stepfather told me he loved me all the time, but then would brutalize me physically and emotionally. That was
Mm,
that was a mind fuck, right? And then
right.
there was constant betrayal, of men. And then couple that with that repression of who we naturally were. Because I was told, especially not just from the men, women in my life too, but for the sake of our conversation, I was told by all the men that I had to change who I naturally was to fit into who they thought I should be. And so there was always a resistance inside of me, but also a magnetic draw towards that for acceptance, right?
What was the toughest thing about that for you, Dustin?
Toughest thing about which part of that?
About, just dealing with being told that I love you and at the same time brutally, like, because I know it's like such a big contradiction. What struggles did that bring up for you in terms of having those two contradictory realities unfolding at the same time?
Well, to be really honest, my D, that shot my nervous system, bro. When I was 10, I had a nervous twitch. I was throwing up blood, coughing so hard I would throw up blood 6, 7 times a day. My face broke out with this, like, what would look like ringworm. I had this big purple splotch on my face. That's what led me to drinking, because I drinking and smoking weed at a very young age in a very abusive way. Bro, to be honest, if I didn't find alcohol and weed at that time, I was so depressed and such in a state of anxiety, I would have killed myself.
Mm.
And so, it shot my nervous system, shot all trust in myself, shot even me having a sense of purpose and place in this world.
Wow. Mm. Thank you for sharing that, man.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. Mahdi, what about you? Like, how did that manifest for you? Because you also maybe not in the same way, but you got mixed messages about who you were in relationship to what other people were telling you it meant to be a man. So how did
Yeah,
that manifest for you?
it manifests as loneliness, me being a loner.
Mm.
Mhm.
You know, I could be with people, be with a lot of people, and they would never know who I was. And I was like great at being with people and them never knowing who I was. I would never share what I really thought or felt about anything. So I was like basically a chameleon, not even knowing that I was a chameleon because I thought I was being real.
Mhm. Mhm.
But as I matured into my full self and began to accurately represent my inner realities, I know now that back then I was a chameleon. The thing that you could count on me as being was that I was always the same. You did not know me, but you thought you did, you know,
Mhm.
because when you don't trust people, you don't really give people an opportunity to know you. So I had a lot of relationships with women. My relationship with women was totally screwed up, to be honest with you, because of my relationship with my own mother and my father. Just that whole. See, let me put it this way: growing up for me, I remember at when maybe 6 or 7, I started asking the question, and the question was, why aren't there any baby pictures of me anywhere around here? Why doesn't any of these adults have a picture of me as a baby? But you know how devastating that was for a 7, 8 year old searching for just some indicator that the people that brought him into this world wanted him. And you're looking around and there's no evidence at all of no baby pictures that you can look at and say, man, this was a time when people were happy that you were here. So the way that would impact me was you got to look out for yourself, you got to look out for your brothers, and keep concentrated on looking out for yourself and looking out for your brothers. So I was on a mission to make sure that me and my two brothers did not get caught up in everything. I saw everybody else get caught in. So that saved my life because they became the purpose and focus for me to get them out. I was like on a soldier on a mission going through enemy territory. You do what you got to do to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Mahdi, wasn't there also a time in your life too where you like seriously thought about not wanting to be here? I mean, you call it suicide or suicidal thoughts or depression, but
I
wasn't there
went through
also a
six.
time for you?
I went through 16 years of depression. Some of the moments I'm talking about now is I was in a state of depression. You know, anger was a good day
Mm-hmm.
because at least I wasn't depressed. And I remember when I went off to college on a football scholarship, I was so business, taking care of business, no fun whatsoever. It was not fun for me. Everybody else was having fun. I was like, I'm seriously got to succeed. I can't afford to fail. My two brothers are counting on me. So I didn't have an enjoying college, time in college. It was just all business. So, the people would tell me on campus, you walk around looking like you could beat up concrete. And at any moment, I probably could have beat up concrete because I had suppressed so much of who I was. And it was like just waiting for the excuse to bring it out. I was like always one moment away from exploding on somebody.
Just as we have this conversation we're having today, I mean, the emotions of this are really hitting me pretty hard, and realizing that our stories are the stories of probably 95 to 98% of the men who are listening
Mm-hmm.
and who are in this world. And we have
Yes.
not created spaces for us to have these conversations, not just to tell war stories, but to have these conversations to purge what is still in us so we can move back towards who we authentically came here to be. And, I just keep thinking of the parallel of racism and what we internalize from racism and what we also internalize from messages of, what is often called toxic masculinity. And, I really want to share this because I think about, intimacy and just thinking that again, why I was so excited to be on this podcast with the two of you, because we have an intimate relationship. There's nothing
Right.
about my life that you both don't know. And I can share authentically and reveal myself to you and as naked as possible. And I think about my best friend growing up. We've been friends since first grade. I mean, all the way through. We're still super tight right now. And we were both going through very similar things. And we never had any language to share what we were going through. I mean, I was dealing with, addiction in my family, the abuse, all that stuff. He was dealing with addiction and abuse. And when he would sleep over my house like all the time, right? We would be with each other all the time. And when it was just the two of us, or maybe one other person, there would be a lot of care. We didn't talk about this stuff, but we could feel that we really cared about each other. But then we would get out and be around some of the other kids in the neighborhood, and we will all start fronting and being tough guys. And just how much that running away from a gentleness with each other, a loving caringness with each other, that makes it so hard for us to show that to another man. Because I was talking to Brother Kelly, folk, y'all who are listening will meet Kelly on this series. But, I used to tell Kelly I love him all the time. And Kelly would say, up until, 2 years ago, I thought that was the weirdest, softest shit, You know what I'm saying? Like we have fear of telling men that we love each other because we don't want to be that punk or sissy that we were told we were when we showed it at 5 and 6 and 7. That's insane.
Right.
Yeah, no.
And what is so scary to me is that we could be 70, 80, 90 years old as men and still holding this shit, and we miss the affection we could have with our children, our friends, our family members. That's this world is a trip.
You saying that, because I brought up a moment for me where, growing up, I was a very sensitive child, like I said to you before. So I had to suppress that, but I still cared about people a lot. And I didn't have a venue to express it. It became like, over exaggeration of masculinity, always, right? There was very little balance. And then that would then turn into homophobia, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of, a feminine man being in my presence would really strike fear in me. And the reason why it would strike fear, because I was afraid of, the stuff that I had been taught about my sensitivity. And I was afraid, I didn't know if it would become something that I could not control.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I remember, when we used to train for the People's Institute, and Ron asked me, without me knowing, to go do a workshop in the French Quarters. And it was for the LGBTQ plus community. I had no idea. But him in his wisdom, he was like, when I got there and I found out what was going on, I was like, man, I was so uncomfortable. I didn't want to stay. So I called him up on the phone and I said, man, you're so wrong for sending me on this workshop. And he's like, you need this. I was like, man, no, I don't. So I sit through the workshop and I noticed the uncomfortableness. It rose up in me so heavy that I had to testify. And what I told the brothers and sisters that were there, I said, I want to be honest with you. I'm terrified right now. Now, that's something I had never done before. And I said, I have this fear, but I'm so glad I'm here because I get a chance to confront my fear and to really confront all of the myths and stuff that I have been taught about what it means to be gay, what it means to be non-binary. And it turned out to be one of the best times I had in my life, because I was able to be around people that were different from me and come to an understanding and stop being afraid based upon socialization. And for me, that was like one of the moments in my life where I started to release the parts of myself that I had been holding back for so long. So I told him, I said, you all don't have a patent on coming out of the closet, because there's a lot of things I need to come out of the closet about. And one of those was about me fully expressing myself. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to do that. And so my relationship with that community completely transformed because my perspective changed based upon the experience. And I thank Ron for that, because, I guess in some way he knew what he was doing, because that was one of the things that transformed my career as a life coach, to be able to work with that community in a healthy way, and to see people fully as they are, and not as what the programs have told us to see people,
And I think, Mahdi, that's such a powerful story, because what you did is you did the thing that all three of us were taught as men to not do, which is to be 100% honest, vulnerable, who you are, like basically, as Dustin said, figuratively standing naked and say, this is who I am, even if you're like scared of the way people will respond to what you say. And that's, in so many ways, I think what you did is you became connected in that moment. You connected fully to yourself, and then allowed you to connect to them, because they wouldn't have respected you, because they would have felt it from you. I'm sure they were feeling it from you, but for you to say it out loud, that in many ways is the opposite of what we were taught as men to do.
Yeah, they embraced me in terms of the fact that I was brave enough, because it took a lot. I had to, like you say, courage. All courage is being afraid but going anyway. And once I started, how your soul works is, once you start opening your mouth to be vulnerable, it just starts coming out and you have no control over it. And I was like, damn, I said all that? I didn't want to say all that. I just wanted to say a little bit, I wanted to control it, but it all came out. And it was so beautiful because it gave me an opportunity to be free of all that baggage that was laid on me unknowingly by my uncles, who were trying their best to help develop me into being a man. I was able to let go of a lot of that so I could get to those parts of myself that had been ignored and isolated. So it's like a part of me came to life that I had thought it was too late for, and that is the deeper expression, which helps to transform my coaching practice.
Right.
Be connected to people is so important.
One of the things that's touching my mind right now, because we're talking a lot about the overt messages we received in terms of being men, but there was also the covert, nothing that was ever said, but things that were done. So I think about, I went through a whole period of my life where I was highly promiscuous, slept around with a lot of women in ways that were manipulative and just out of integrity for myself, as well as the women that I was doing this with. And, when I look back, every male, nobody told me, well, actually, some men did tell me this, but not my father or my grandfather. They didn't never tell me to be promiscuous, but they showed me that by example. I did not know one adult male in my family who was not unfaithful in their relationships. And I cheated on every relationship that I was ever in, almost on autopilot, and I was able to numb out the lack of integrity, the dishonesty, showing up as less than myself to my partners, as well as to the women that I was, engaged in this promiscuous behavior with. And, that created such a cost in my life. I mean, it was an addictive set of behaviors. And of course, the different men that were around me, throughout school, we all basically we were saying, if you didn't sleep with a lot of women, you were, again, a punk or a sissy or less than a man. And the amount of women you slept with was somehow a measurement of your maleness and the truthfulness of your maleness. And it was also really condoned to be manipulative, to lie, to be controlling, to have game. We would call it game. How much game you got? Or you ain't got no game, but it really was game. We were playing childish games. And just, I know for me, so many of the messages weren't always overt messages. I mean, definitely had those, but so much of it was covert by
Man, I'm
behavior.
gonna tell you, you just said a mouthful. When I think about relationships, I did not see any healthy relationships between a man and a woman at all until I got to college, and there was brief stints of it, because I really never saw a black man and a black woman have like loving, caring emotions demonstrated toward each other. Until one day, my roommate in college named Brian Maxfield, Brian invited me to his house for the weekend. And me and Brian are sitting down watching television, on Saturday morning. And there comes his father from upstairs. He comes downstairs into the kitchen. He walks up to his wife. He gives her a kiss, a real kiss on the lips, and smacks on the butt. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? In my mind, I'm like really tripping, because I had never seen it before in my life. And I laugh at this every time I tell people this story. I thought they were performing for me, right? So the next day, on that Sunday, we watching television again. His dad comes down because he had a weekend shift. He comes downstairs, does the exact same thing. It was then it dawned on me, damn, that shit was like television. I was like, it's like relationships on TV. That is really possible. So in my mind, it was then I began to realize that it was possible to have a healthy looking relationship. But of course, think about how far away that was from me. I had no idea what they did to get there.
Yeah.
Because there was no one modeling for me around. Because my dad, my mom fought when they divorced. My dad remarried, and him and his new wife, they fought the same way he fought with my mama. So it was the same thing. I'm like, man, The idea of having a healthy relationship, I had no clue how you get there.
Amen.
And what I want to say to that is I think in so many of these things, as I said earlier, and all of us have mentioned, race plays a role in this. For me, I was presented, having my mother and my father together until I was 18, 19 years old when they got divorced. But I was presented with a facade, but what it covered up was crazy shit going on in the background. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so it's like, what I'm really feeling very strongly about this conversation, and it's been brought up a couple times, that this conversation, the masculinity conversation, is in many ways, parallel to the race conversation in terms of, how much these subconscious messages, these constant messaging we get about what to be or what not to be and our value in it, and how when it doesn't match up with how you see yourself, or it doesn't match up with the way you see your world, it creates conflict in you. And I want to make sure to add in, because while my experience was different, I feel like it was the second side of the same coin as both of you. And also, and you both know this, and I've shared this on the podcast before, but I also was incredibly depressed. Started doing drugs and alcohol at 12. And at 15, definitely, tried hard to not be alive, tried hard to kill myself, and have had self-destructive behavior a lot of my life. And I think the thing that always comes up that I think we all have in common is the level of disconnect. And even though it plays out very differently, the constant lies we were told about who we are, who we were, what it means to be a man, and how that doesn't match up to the way we see ourselves deep inside.
Martin, as you say, the stuff that played out behind the scenes, what was some of that stuff? And then how did that show up in your expression of being a man, both relationships, relating to other men? And I know you touched on some of this earlier.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was, I was presented that our family was basically like the perfect family, that we had no problems because we had no overt problems. But behind the scenes, my parents had a very dysfunctional relationship, pretty much, I would say, loveless, for a lot of the last part of their lives, or not last part of their lives, but last part of their marriage together. But also, there was sexual abuse in my home. There was like just massive dysfunction. And, our family went to therapy like almost as young as I can remember. We were in family therapy. They put me in individual therapy, but we were in family therapy early on. And yet we still had this facade that like everything was good. But, depression, just, yeah, I mean, it's just so many things that were happening. And the biggest thing for me, which again, I really relate in different ways how you both said it. The biggest thing for me was that I felt what was going on, and I felt what was right, and I felt like I knew who I was, but I was constantly told that what I felt was wrong, and to not trust my emotions, to not trust what I feel. I was too sensitive, too angry. So I picked up on the problems from as young as I can remember, and yet it was always denied to me. And that, there's definitely gender aspects to that for sure. And there's just human aspects to it too. Anybody that's made to doubt and question what you feel at like the deepest level of your soul, that's going to be damaging. And for me, being a boy, there was definitely messages told to me like how I could and couldn't handle, how I could and couldn't be, how sensitive I was allowed to be, all of that. I mean, I think it's, we've been talking for a while, you all, and I think it's probably a good idea for us to maybe bring this particular episode to a close and transition moving forward. But really, I think, if we could each just talk for a minute about, we're going to go on this journey. We're going to go on this journey with other people, not just the three of us. But as we go on into this journey, if we could all just share a little bit about, how we see these messages that we got, as you say, Dustin, overtly and covertly. And I think in our next episode, I'd really like the three of us to keep talking about messages that we receive, but not just from our families, but from systems and institutions, from media, from school, from sports and entertainment and all of that. But maybe as we move forward, just to kind of wrap up for today, like, how would you all say, what was the impact of the different things that you were told of what it meant to be a man in terms of how your relationships played out. Maybe we can just have that as our closing conversation today, and then we'll move in to the next topic on our next episode.
For me, I think that's a good question, and I want to be totally honest with you as we're talking about this stuff. So, it's bringing up stuff for me, right? And when you start talking about this stuff, it brings up stuff that you don't even know that still there, right? When you're just going over some of this stuff. So for me, what it meant to be a man, the messages I got was that it meant walking through the world not being seen by anybody. Almost like being a spirit or a ghost. You're there, but you're not there. And no one really sees for you for who you are. So I learned to just do a lot. I was the person that did everything. I was the person that carried the most weight. You couldn't carry more weight than me. You could not work me. You could not run me. You could not think me. But I was doing it because I thought that's what I had to do in order to have value. And so because of that, I really, missed out on opportunities for people to see me. I'm 55 and I'm just being seen, just learning how to allow people to see me. I think that so many men walk through life never being seen, never being touched for real.
Thank you.
I would say for me, I walked through the vast majority of my life being completely numbed out from others, but most importantly from myself, just being very performative in almost every aspect of my life. And of course, struggling with deep depression, extreme self-destructive behaviors, and not allowing myself to really sink into relationships in a way that was loving and gentle and being fully present. And, still very much, I've done a lot of healing work around what we're talking about, but just like Mahdi, as we're having this conversation, more and more is coming up for me through this conversation. And, I'm thankful that we created a space for us to be courageous today, to share this with each other. I know we've talked about pockets, different variations of this with each other, but to have this conversation and to have this conversation publicly, I'm very thankful. And because I know so many men, and, I coach basketball and I look at our young men, and so many of our young men are dealing with this, and there's no avenue to explore this. And there's only going to be, as this world is designed, especially today, a lot of cancellation and punishment, when what is really needed is an avenue for honesty and healing. So I'm thankful for both of you.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because, the cancellation and punishment is actually counterintuitive and counterproductive to the whole idea of healing and people growing. And the very people that are doing the canceling are one day going to want somebody to give them room to grow. And you can't grow without making mistakes. You can't grow without, applying what you learned from the past to this present moment. It's just the nature of growth. Do we want people to grow, or do we want people to continue to hide? I hid for years, but I didn't even know I was hiding. I thought I was being real, but I was hiding because I didn't know what it meant to be me, because this world took that from me at a very early age. And I had to discover it, like so many other men and women have to discover who they are as they go through their lives.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, both of you. And I think for me also, that hiding piece is huge. I think what I was taught that being a man meant to me in many ways was like, you're supposed to be in charge. You're supposed to take responsibility. But for me, I was taught there was a lot of fear behind that responsibility, and that responsibility was like granted and not earned. And definitely through the lens of race, there was this idea that, as a white man, you're expected that you're going to run some shit someday, and nobody ever sat down and really talked to me about what they thought about that for themselves. The white men in my life never talked to me about what that felt like to them. And the messages that I got was definitely a message of like loneliness and disconnect. And I would echo what both of you just said, which is that, I feel incredibly blessed that I've been able to find different relationships with men, and that connected and feeling relationships with men, that I've been able to do that in this lifetime, and trusting relationships with men. And so I'm very appreciative of both of you being in my life in general, and then very specifically being able to have this conversation so openly and in such a raw way today.
Yeah, this has been a very enriching conversation. I hope that there are men out there who could help locate themselves from in this conversation and begin to really become adjusted to who you really are.
That's right. Maybe the last thing I want to say to the listeners is this is not a one-off. This is going to be a series of ongoing conversation with workshops coming where we'll get together and really start to explore this stuff to create the opportunity for some healing so we can begin to heal our world together and bring our families and our communities back together in a whole healthy way, raise our boys and our girls in a way that's really reflective of their divine nature and their beauty.
That's right. And all of us have a path of liberation, of being liberated from all of this trauma and all of these things that was put on us. There's a path for every one of us out of this. And we always do this from a place of love. We may not have met you yet, but we already love you. And we love the you who you really are. And not the you that you've come to believe you are, but the you that you really are. And that's what this journey is to be in Soul Focus is all about. So with that, we ask you to, as Dustin said, go to our website, always check in at soulfocusgroup.com. You're going to see all different kinds of offerings moving forward. We ask that everybody be on this journey with us, and we ask that you stay safe, stay well, and most of all, stay soul focused.